AI will lower the threshold for who can actually run these attacks. I don't need a huge team of people to run a cybersecurity attack anymore. And these hackers, they use the AI agents, as we talked about a little bit, like a junior operator. I can just point these things at a target, and as long as I have the requisite knowledge, baseline requisite knowledge, about how to run a cyber attack, about how to get into an enemy system, I can load a prompt for an AI agent and then just let it go. So I don't need a big team of people. I don't need a bunch of money and a bunch of to pay a bunch of these people to do all this. I just need a couple of subject matter experts that can run the system and point it in the right direction. Welcome back to Gray and Gritty. I am LJ.
And I'm Sandy Winnefeld.
And we have a fully funded and open government, Dad.
But more importantly, congratulations to Navy, who pulled off quite an upset yesterday over USF. Does that put them in the driver's seat in the American Conference?
It does. Navy has a game on Thursday night, Thanksgiving Thursday night, against Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. And if they win that game, they'll be headed to the American Athletic Conference Championship, which frankly to me, it's awesome if we win that, but I would much rather beat Army a week later in Baltimore. I saw Georgia Tech barely pulled one out against a 1-9, now 1-10 Boston College. What's up with that?
Yeah, the Cardiac Kids. They started off the season really, really hot, and yesterday they should have dominated BC for a signature win, but their pass defense has fallen on hard times. They're still a really tough team offensively, but I'm starting to get a little bit worried about it. We'll see what happens next weekend when Pitt comes to visit Georgia Tech at the Flats.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a game that'll determine a lot of things, not just for the ACC, but potentially for the college football playoff as well. I think Brent Key said it best when he was asked, "So how'd the game go?" He said, "We won, but we got a lot of work on."
Yeah, he was pretty grim after that was
Yeah.
over. I can't blame him. It might have been an interesting locker room. Mm-hmm. So anyway, today we're going to cover an AI-powered cyber attack, a little-known stretch of water that may be the key in a China-Taiwan conflict, and a couple of other things. Over to you.
Yeah, let's start with something that sounds like science fiction, but just happened in the real world. A Chinese state-linked hacking group launched a cyber attack using Anthropic's Claude model to run most of the cyber espionage campaign by itself. There were roughly 30 global targets ranging from tech and finance to government. The targets were hit with just a few clicks of guidance, and the AI handled about 80 to 90% of the work. That included scanning, finding vulnerabilities, generating exploit code, and even helping move inside the victims' networks. Anthropic calls it the first documented large-scale cyber attack executed primarily by an AI agent. Now, what is an AI agent? It's something that I've recently learned about, even though I've been doing a lot with machine learning, with the work that I've been doing with Georgia Tech in my free time. But this is something that I just learned what an AI agent is. And directly from Anthropic, models can act as agents now. Something that's new. This has just come about in the last year or so. And an agent means that the AI can run loops where they take autonomous actions, chain together tasks, and make decisions with only minimal and occasional human input. Essentially, you run this thing on its own. It can operate in the background and make intelligent decisions based off of the code that it may have even generated for itself, based off of the input that you gave it, the prompt that you gave it. And it seems like this is what this Chinese-backed group did. Really, my first reaction to this thing is that the threshold that we have crossed here is not that AI is involved in cyber operations. That's something that has been true for the last few years, but rather that AI agents are now doing most of the operational heavy lifting in a real state-linked campaign. I'll get into my second piece here in a second. Dad, you just wrote an article for Gray and Gritty talking about AI on the defensive side. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit of that, and what is your take here about this AI-powered cyber attack?
Well, Ajay, we knew this was coming. It was only a matter of time before cyber attacks became more automated using agent-based attacks, as you just described. AI agents are forms of generational AI that are able to go beyond merely stringing the next likely word together into something that makes sense. They're weirdly able to actually think through strategies and execute them, as you pointed out. And of course, this is very concerning. In the best case, we'll find a way to constrain agents to ensure they only perform non-harmful tasks. Well, that train has left the station. The next base case is that they would only do what humans tell them to do and nothing else. Obviously, the worst case for agentic AI, which the doomsayers point to, is that they decide we humans are useless and find a way to do away with us.
That's Skynet, yes.
I think we're a long way away from that. But back to reality, back to the ground. I talked to a friend who runs a company called Acalvio. And full disclosure, I'm a part-time advisor to Acalvio about this problem. His company uses AI to provide what's called deception cybersecurity. And I wrote about this in one of our posts. You know, a lot of people out there trying to do cybersecurity think in terms of, well, I've got to have a firewall to keep the bad guys out. And then when the bad guys get in, they're going to raise hell. And I'm just going to have ways of being resilient to kind of put Humpty Dumpty back together. But deception cybersecurity actually fights on your own turf. You can think of it as a fort. And maybe the bad guys got into the fort, but that doesn't mean you just give up. You can take them on tooth and nail. And this is what these guys do. They use AI to generate thousands of convincing, shape-shifting honeypots and other techniques that can literally trap a cyber attacker. So my question to Ram was, how would a defending AI perform against an attacking AI? And especially one using agentic AI, would an attacking agent find it easier to distinguish an AI-generated honeypot from just a useful node that it would want to exploit? Well, he says the incident with Anthropic has been one of the most consequential and energizing events for those in deception cybersecurity land. You've heard of AIs hallucinating. Well, he says that now using defensive AI, forced hallucinations can be used as a defense strategy against AI attacks, including those done by agentic AI. And you cannot run one AI to discern if another one is hallucinating or deceiving. So eventually all these hallucinations and deceptions are going to get figured out by the attacking AI. But if it's done right, the adversary's actions will have been recognized by then, and that enables the right countermeasures. It's sort of spy versus spy, dog eat dog out there. And stay tuned. This cybersecurity discipline just continues to evolve. So over to you for our next segment.
But yeah, it's amazing how much improvement there's been, and I think it's just going faster and faster now with the introduction of AI. I think the idea of forcing a hallucination onto an AI attacker or on an AI agent is pretty brilliant, frankly, because when we operate with ChatGPT or with Claude or with whatever, choose your AI system, you have to be very, very careful. And a lot of people run into issues when they just blindly trust what the AI spits back at them. And I think that now you're kind of thinking, okay, which system is going to be better programmed? Because the competition may not be necessarily who has a better firewall, but who has a better AI agent to run that defensive metric. And I think the point there of buying time so that you can recognize that, hey, somebody's within my system, and trap them and maybe try and find where this is coming from is really the biggest thing. Okay, maybe they get into the system, but trying to slow them down. The second thing here that I think is important is really that it's going to lower the threshold. AI will lower the threshold for who can actually run these attacks. I don't need a huge team of people to run a cybersecurity attack anymore. And these hackers, they use the AI agents, as we talked about a little bit, like a junior operator. I can just point these things at a target, and as long as I have the requisite knowledge, baseline requisite knowledge, about how to run a cyber attack, about how to get into an enemy system, I can load a prompt for an AI agent and then just let it go. So I don't need a big team of people. I don't need a bunch of money and a bunch of to pay a bunch of these people to do all this. I just need a couple of subject matter experts that can run the system and point it in the right direction and then adjust it on the fly if necessary. So you're taking out 80 to 90% of the work, which means you're taking out 80 to 90% of the manpower, which will just make this not only faster, but more cost effective and probably more frequent moving forward, because I don't need, I don't need 80 people focused on this. I can have 2 or 3 people focused on it.
And these agentic AI pieces are not necessarily running the point of attack. They're actually quite useful in other areas that are associated with the attack. preparing for the attack, and then what you do after the attack is successful. But it's a tough world out there. Speaking
Absolutely.
of a tough world, there's a narrow stretch of water most Americans have never heard of. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, talking about the Bashi Channel specifically. It is a channel that is between Taiwan and the northern Philippine Islands. And this channel, in a war over Taiwan, could be decisive about whether or not Chinese warships and submarines could move freely into the Pacific. Or, frankly, will they run into a wall of anti-ship missiles and surveillance? It's also very important for Chinese shipping. One of many gaps, there are tons of gaps in what's called the first island chain, which runs from Japan south through the Philippine Islands into Indonesia and down into Malaysia. And the United States has decided to posture itself where if China were to escalate tensions over Taiwan or over another part of the world, potentially the South China Sea, to put a lot of forces around these gaps and to put pressure on Chinese shipping and Chinese warships to say, hey, slow down what you're doing. Don't escalate further than you already have, because we can cut you off from the world's supply. We can stop your economy from essentially functioning by cutting down these gaps. And the Bashi Channel is one of these areas. There have been a lot of U.S. Filipino exercises, particularly around this area. And I can remember a time not too long ago when it looked like the Philippines were moving a lot closer to China. Under Duterte, the previous president, in the late 2010s, the Philippines were really leaning into the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, trying to garner a bunch of money and investment. And when that kind of fell off, and when Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. came in the mid 2022, and I know you were at his inauguration, Dad, they've largely reversed that rhetoric. And this has been solidified through not just deeper ties with the United States, but also with Japan, Australia, and the EU. Before I dive into my view of the region and kind of a tactical level and some of the stuff on the anti-ship missiles that might be used in this strait system that I've worked with personally, I wanted to get your thoughts on using these gaps around Taiwan to help deter any potential action by China on Taiwan.
Sure. And boy, you brought back a memory that sitting through the inauguration for Marcos and the subsequent parade was maybe the longest, hottest 4 or 5 hours I've ever spent in my life. I think I drank 10 water bottles and didn't even go use the restroom. It was amazing. But here the theory is that if you can constrain the Chinese military from getting past that chain, it would hinder their ability to conduct malign action further in the Pacific, as you pointed out. The question is, how do we do that in a world where China is devoting a ton of resources to preventing us from doing that, in which any forces that we have that are easily visible are also easily targeted? So one method would be to use sea mines to hamper Chinese movements. The truth is that we have not used the incredible advances in technology that have happened in this century to advance the state of the art and science of sea mining. Why not? Well, the principal reason is that there's no really senior officer in the Navy that grew up doing this and, is not a champion. And it's not very sexy warfare. It's not like a, slick and perfumed destroyer, going through the seas at 35 knots, shooting down missiles.
Dropping mines is not the same as Top Gun. There's no movie that's going to be made about advanced sea mines in the Strait of Taiwan.
Maybe someday. You never know. But I've written a lot about the art of the possible here, using both machine learning and agent-based AI, speaking of that, for everything from acoustic processing to differentiate targets to tactics management for how do you actually run these things, and as well as incorporating sophisticated communications technologies, small torpedoes to extend their range, and the like. There's a lot of potential there, but we're not taking advantage of it. But you Marines have a few tricks up your sleeves in this area.
Absolutely. So the Marine Corps has decided to adopt the Expeditionary Advanced Base as its means to deter future Chinese aggression and to counter a lot of Chinese capability in this part of the world. And really what it is it's small, far-flung bases that are self-sustaining and have unique and exquisite capabilities as a part of them. One of those being anti-ship missiles. And the system in particular that is being used in this strait is called Nemesis, or the Navy Marine Corps Ship Interdiction System. And it is a semi-long range anti-ship missile that is a conglomeration of various different defense contractors that have come together to make a autonomously driving tactical vehicle that has anti-ship missiles on it. The missile itself was originally made, believe it or not, by Norway to counter Russian aggression in the fjords up in Norway. And we've adopted it for use in the Southeast Asian littorals. And it's a very capable missile that can reach out and touch ships from a pretty far ways away. But putting Marines in these choke points with these exquisite capabilities, and not only that, and I think frankly even more importantly, drilling with our allies like the Philippines and demonstrating a proof of capability and a determination to counter Chinese aggression, I think provides a very, very strong signal to the Chinese to say, hey, if you were to escalate along the scale of conflict, there's going to be some serious consequences, not just for your military, but also potentially for your economy and for your shipping. So by placing these exquisite systems that are survivable, they're autonomous. So if we shoot at a Chinese ship and they return fire, you're killing a robot. You're not killing a United States Marine, which lowers the threshold for us to use those systems because I'm not putting a human in harm's way. And now I can more readily attack Chinese shipping or Chinese warships. I think it really sends a strong deterrent signal to the Chinese. And one of the biggest things that I've thought a lot about is in Ukraine, it was very easy for us to send assistance to the Ukrainians. There are lots of railroads, lots of roads. You can fly things in relatively easily into Ukraine. So you don't necessarily have to have a ton of equipment in Ukraine prior to a Russian invasion to be able to provide support. That is not the same for Taiwan. And that's something that I think a lot of people overlook is if the Chinese decide to move on Taiwan, you have to either already be there or have a plan to deter them from outside of Taiwan. And unlike with Russia, where Russia can easily trade with its partners over land borders, the Chinese primarily use shipping off of their east coast to sustain their economy. So they have a critical vulnerability with these gaps. And I think the expeditionary advance-based operations that the Marine Corps is employing are a great deterrent because of that. So it's on one side, it's tough because you cannot get equipment and supplies to Taiwan in the same way that you can into Ukraine. But there is a critical vulnerability on the flip side of that where you can put a lot of pressure on China that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on Russia.
Now, for these expeditionary advanced base operations, one of the things is that you have to be able to do, even though there's a lot of autonomy associated with this, you have to be able to hide. Physically and electronically, and you and I have talked a good bit about that. We have a few tricks up our sleeve there also. Now, one of the ways that people think the Chinese are going to challenge the first island chain is with aircraft carriers. And they recently commissioned their third and most capable carrier, the Fujian. I think we mentioned this last week. The Washington Post this week had a top-of-the-fold, rather panicky article about this just the other day. Strangely, the article focused mostly on the fact that the Fujian has electromagnetic catapults. They likely stole that technology from us as we painstakingly developed it for our newest carrier, the Gerald Ford. And yes, these catapults are really useful in terms of the pace of launching aircraft and maintenance requirements and people requirements and the like. But electronic catapults are not everything that makes a capable modern nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The Chinese still have to get to nuclear power, which we understand they're trying to do. And they also don't have the nearly 100 years of experience we have in this very, very complicated operation, and their aircraft aren't quite as good as we are. And interestingly, the Post article focused on what we've just been talking about, using the carrier to contest us in a war over Taiwan. Maybe. But you don't spend all the money to build an aircraft carrier to defend your in-close area unless you're dumb or you're only doing it for the prestige of having an aircraft carrier. You build an aircraft carrier, as we do, so you can project power at a distance. That's what's going to be very interesting to me. Do the Chinese intend to do that? How will they do that? Can they reach the level of logistics and operational competence that we have required to use that carrier pretty far away from China? It's going to be interesting to watch it. Now, I want to get back to something you said a minute ago, talking about the advanced base operations. There are some older retired Marines who are not too happy about this because perhaps they think that the Marine Corps has wholeheartedly swung its entire effort over to that mission. But it's really important for our listeners to understand that, there are still Marine expeditionary units that deploy on amphibious ships all around the world. They play an incredibly important crisis response role. And then with this amazingly versatile force that we have, there are other missions that they do as well. And as part of that, I understand that last week some of your fellow Marines were under fire at the embassy in Port-au-Prince. What was up with that?
Yeah, it was really an unprecedented event. Marines have not come under direct fire like that since the withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. The incident happened on Thursday evening, November 13th, in Port-au-Prince near the U.S. Embassy. Something that I don't think a lot of people were tracking is that in August of this year, the U.S. quietly sent extra Marines to guard the embassy in Haiti.
And you have some experience with this kind of thing.
I do, yes. Now, Marines are at every single embassy in the world. Any embassy, there is going to be at least a small contingent of Marines. Now, obviously, some of those embassies are a lot better than others in terms of their lifestyle and security. If you're a Marine in guarding the embassy in London, your life is a lot different than if you're a Marine guarding the embassy in Baghdad or Port-au-Prince. Now, if a situation becomes tense and it seems like there is a likelihood that the embassy might get attacked or the security situation in a nation is deteriorating rapidly, the regional security officer or RSO of the embassy will get with the chief of mission and make a determination in conjunction with the Department of War whether or not they want to bring in additional Marines. Now, this could be more Marine security guards that are trained specifically to do this, and that is their only role, or it could be, no kidding, line infantry Marines, like my company was in Baghdad. In 2020, we took out Qasem Soleimani at the Baghdad International Airport in Iraq, and as a response, the Shia militia groups in Iraq decided to send a message by attacking our embassy in Baghdad. And then in response to that, the Department of State asked the then Department of Defense to send a company of Marines to help guard the embassy. Now, I do want to make it very clear that the State Department has a lot of very, very capable security officers in a very capable security apparatus. But in terms of defending against, a deliberate attack like what we saw in Baghdad, or the rapidly deteriorating security environment in Haiti, where over 80% of Port-au-Prince is governed, essentially, and I use quotes there, by gangs. Bringing in additional support, bringing in Marines who are designed to bring, hate and discontent and are trained specifically to guard embassies and helps to bolster that security apparatus. But again, this was probably a discussion between the regional security officer and the chief of mission and the Department of War, because bringing in additional troops doesn't necessarily always say great things about the diplomatic mission. So this was a deliberate decision to bring Marines in. And for the first time since August of 2021, Marines came under fire and returned fire, which is a key thing, that they actually returned fire to these gangs. Luckily, no Marines were hurt. But again, there's really, really good reason why the Marines are there in Port-au-Prince protecting our embassy, and a really unprecedented event with Marines coming under fire.
Yeah, and our Marine security guards are a sort of a separate, very specially trained force, very professional group, and their job in embassies around the world is really not to defend the embassy. It's really to defend classified material and control access to the embassy. But if you have a real threat, you're going to need reinforcements, and that sounds exactly what they did in Port-au-Prince. And I have to tell you that if I was a gang member in Port-au-Prince, I don't think I'd want to exchange fire with U.S. Marines. That's not a very smart thing to do. So maybe,
my speculation here, and I don't have any access to the information, but my speculation here is that the gang members, these were probably newer gang members that were trying to prove something, or they didn't realize who they were firing upon, or maybe just didn't realize that the Marines, because I can guarantee you that if somebody shoots at a Marine squad guarding a wall at an embassy, they're going to get a whole heck of a lot more back towards them. And it's going to be very accurate fire as well. So, and I didn't see any reports if any of the gang members were killed or injured, but no Marines were, and that is really the most important thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's really good that all of our folks are okay. Well, I think that probably does it for another episode of Gray and Gritty, number 3. Really enjoying doing this with you, LJ, and we'll be back next week with another episode.
Yes, another great episode. And like we always say, something's bound to happen this week, and we will talk about it next Sunday, and the episode will come out the following Monday. Thank you all for listening, and I'll throw a shameless plug out there. Please, if you are enjoying our content, both either written or through this audio medium that we're experimenting with, please share it with your friends and family and with your network.
All right, we'll see you next week during Thanksgiving week. Take care.